Let me ask you something uncomfortable. You're a good person. You're considerate, you try not to make waves, you go out of your way to keep the peace. So why is it that the people around you seem to respect you less for it? Why do the ones who are louder, colder, and a lot less agreeable seem to get taken more seriously? It doesn't feel fair. And honestly, it isn't. But here's the thing most people never figure out. The problem isn't that you're too kind. The problem is that you're too predictable. And predictable people get treated like furniture. They're useful, they're always there, and nobody thinks twice about them. Today, we're going to change that. Not by turning you into someone cold or manipulative, not by telling you to stop caring about people, but by giving you 5 psychological formulas that shift the dynamic quietly and permanently, so that the people in your life start treating you the way you've always deserved to be treated. These aren't tricks, they're principles. And once you understand them, you'll start seeing them everywhere. Let's talk about silence first, because most people are absolutely terrified of it. Picture this. Your boss walks over to your desk at 4:30 on a Friday and says, "Hey, I know it's last minute, but can you take care of this report over the weekend?" And what do? If you're like most people, you say sure before you've even finished hearing the sentence. Maybe you smile a little too wide. Maybe you feel a tiny knot in your stomach that you ignore. And your boss walks away, already thinking about his weekend, while you sit there wondering how this keeps happening to you. Here's what that instant yes communicates, whether you mean it to or not. It says you were just sitting here waiting to be needed. It says your time has no particular value. It says I can be called upon whenever without much consideration because I will never push back. You've just told someone, without using a single word, that you are available on demand. Now, imagine the same scenario. Your boss makes the same request, and this time, you don't answer right away. You hold eye contact for about 2 seconds. You let the silence sit there, and then, calmly, you respond. Those 2 seconds change everything. What happens in that pause is pure psychology. Silence creates pressure. When a person asks something and doesn't get an immediate response, their brain interprets that as weight, as deliberation, as someone who doesn't just react, but thinks. You go from being a person who's easily managed to a person who needs to be considered. And your answer, whatever it is, carries a completely different kind of authority. You don't have to be rude. You don't have to make it dramatic. 2 seconds of eye contact and stillness is all it takes. Try it once this week and watch how differently the conversation goes.
Now, let's talk about something that might seem small, but is quietly one of the most powerful shifts you can make in how people perceive you. And it has to do with the way you apologize. Or more specifically, why you need to stop apologizing so much. Think about how many times a day you say sorry. You bump into someone in a grocery store. Sorry. You ask a question in a meeting. Sorry to interrupt. You send an email at an unusual hour. Sorry for reaching out late. You're walking into a room and someone's in your way. You say sorry even though they're the one blocking the door. Every one of those apologies feels polite in the moment, but over time they build a picture. And the picture is of someone who is constantly at fault, constantly behind, constantly in the wrong. The word sorry used that often stops meaning anything. It just becomes a social tick that signals one thing clearly. I'm lower status than you in this interaction. Here's the reframe. Instead of apologizing, express gratitude. It sounds like a small swap, but the psychological effect is completely different. Instead of saying, "Sorry I'm late," you say, "Thank you for waiting." Instead of "Sorry for the long email," you say, "I appreciate you taking the time to read through this." Instead of "Sorry, I have a question," you say, "I'd love to get your perspective on something." Instead of "Sorry to bother you," you say, "I know your time is valuable, so I'll be quick." Notice what changes. When you apologize, you're centering your mistake. You're making yourself the subject of a failure. When you express gratitude, you're centering the other person's generosity. You're giving them a small compliment. And the power dynamic shifts. You're no longer the one who's behind. You're the one who noticed their patience and chose to acknowledge it. It's subtle, it's gracious, and it quietly repositions you.
Start paying attention to how often you apologize in situations where nothing actually went wrong. Every time you catch yourself, try the swap. It will feel unnatural at first. Do it anyway. Within a few weeks, the way people respond to you will start to shift in ways you can feel. Now here's the one that might make you a little uncomfortable because it goes against almost everything we're taught about being likable and open and relatable. We're told that sharing is connecting, that vulnerability builds trust, that letting people in makes them feel close to you. And that's true to a point. But there's a version of openness that doesn't build connection. It builds a target. Watch what happens with people who overshare. They tell you about their morning commute, their sleep problems, their frustration with their coworker, their weekend plans, their childhood, their anxiety, their relationship drama, all within the first 20 minutes of knowing them. And the thing is, you don't trust them more for it. You trust them less. Because if they'll say all of that to you, they'll say all of that to anyone. And there's nothing special about what they've shared, which means there's nothing special about you for receiving it. Mystery is authority. This isn't just a social observation. It's backed by decades of psychological research on perceived status and competence. People consistently rate individuals who are harder to read as more intelligent, more capable, and more interesting than those who are immediately transparent. The human brain is wired to assign value to things that require effort to understand. This doesn't mean you become cold or evasive. It means you become intentional. You answer what's asked without elaborating beyond what's necessary. You don't volunteer your emotional state to every room you walk into. You don't explain your decisions to people who didn't ask for an explanation. When someone asks how you're doing, "Fine, thanks," is a complete sentence. When someone asks what you did this weekend, "Something nice," is a perfectly acceptable answer. Let the people around you wonder about you a little. Not because you're playing games, but because not everything about you is public property. Your interior life is yours. And when you stop laying it out for everyone to inspect, something interesting happens. People start to pay more attention when you do speak. Your words carry more weight because they don't come constantly. You become the person in the room that others try to figure out, instead of the person they've already categorized. That's a very different kind of presence. All right, let's talk about the one that trips up good people more than almost anything else. And it's the way they say no. Or really, the way they can't quite get themselves to say it. And when they do, they bury it under so many reasons and apologies and alternative offers that it barely registers as a no at all. You've probably done this. Someone asks you for a favor you genuinely can't do or just don't want to do. And instead of saying no clearly, you say something like, "Oh gosh, I wish I could, I really do. But I've got this thing, and then my sister is coming into town, and I've been trying to get ahead on this project at work, and it's just been a really crazy month, honestly, and I feel terrible because normally I would absolutely help, and maybe if you give me a little more notice next time, I could probably figure something out." What does all of that communicate? It communicates that you feel guilty for saying no, that you're asking for their permission to decline, that you don't fully believe your no is justified on its own. And most importantly, it gives the other person a roadmap. Every single reason you offered is something they can work around or dismiss or argue against. You've handed them the tools to keep pushing. Here's what a grounded no sounds like. "That's not going to work for me." Or, "I won't be able to help with this one." That's it. You don't need to perform remorse. You don't need to present your calendar as evidence. The explanation you're compulsively attaching to your no isn't for them. It's for you. It's a way of managing your own discomfort, and all it does is signal that your decision isn't quite final yet. When you say no and then fall quiet, you're communicating something very different. You're communicating that the decision is made, that your time and your commitments have already been considered, that you don't need their approval to hold your own position. And people, whether they like your answer or not, will respect that kind of clarity in a way they will never respect a 1,000-word apology dressed up as a refusal. Practice saying no in low-stakes situations first. A friend asks if you want to grab lunch on a day you'd rather rest. "No, I've got plans." That's enough. A salesperson asks if you want to hear about a promotion. "No, thank you." Done.
Build the muscle in moments where the pressure is low, so that when the real moments come, the ones at work or in relationships where boundaries actually matter, your no comes out clean and steady because it's had practice. Here's what ties all 5 of these together, because at their core, they're not really about tactics. They're about something much deeper. Most people who get walked on don't get walked on because they're weak. They get walked on because somewhere along the way, they decided that keeping the peace was more important than keeping their integrity, that being liked was more valuable than being respected, that saying yes, even when it cost them, was safer than saying no and risking someone's disapproval.
And the cost of that decision compounds over years. You end up surrounded by relationships where you give more than you receive, where your time is borrowed constantly because everyone has learned they can borrow it, where your opinion is the last one considered because you've trained people to overlook it, not because they're bad people, but because you taught them over and over again that you would tolerate it. The owl doesn't make noise to prove it's powerful. It sits still, it watches, and when it moves with complete precision and complete commitment. That's the kind of presence we're talking about. Not aggressive, not cold, not performative, just grounded, certain, unhurried. You can be the warmest, most generous person in every room you walk into and still be someone that no one would dare take for granted. Those two things are not in conflict. The difference is that people who command real respect have made a quiet decision about themselves. They've decided that their time matters, that their comfort matters, that their answer means something. Not because they announced it, because they live like it's true. The 2-second pause before you answer, the thank you instead of the sorry, the willingness to let people wonder about you, the clean no with nothing attached, the unshakable stillness that comes from knowing what you're worth. These aren't personality traits you either have or you don't. They're habits, and habits can be built one moment at a time, starting today. If this landed for you, stay close. Next time, we're going to talk about the specific mental patterns that keep smart, capable people stuck in financial cycles they can't seem to break, no matter how hard they work. You're not going to want to miss it.